Bonjour à toutes et à tous, de retour sur le plateau du Vape Expo pour cette première conférence du lundi 22 septembre 2014 à Paris, à la Villette. On va parler cet après-midi de la directive européenne, directive sur les produits du tabac et son implication en ce qui concerne les produits de la vape, la cigarette électronique.
So, please, would you welcome our two speakers? So, honor for women of the Lorien JOLLYE. So, very welcome to you. You are advocates at ECCA and Association of Vapers, American Vapers, and you need the translation in order to understand my questions and to follow our debate. And also, Arnaud and Ecig Intelligence, you deal with all the regulation and all these aspects. So before entering in the debate, I would like to tell you something which has been sent from Frédérique RIES, the European deputy, which was to be present, but she's not. Actually, she is working on a report on ONGs for different matters. And Frédérique RIES is European deputy, and she is really involved on the TPD and European directive, which has been adopted on the 4th of April 2014 in Brussels. And we have 2 years delay for its transposition, and it has been very important for the whole community. Her message is the following. I would like to welcome you here and to thank you for your invitation. Unfortunately, I cannot be here this afternoon. With that message, I would like to congratulate you with all your commitment for that revolution, really technological revolution, which will enable the diffusion of new regulations in Europe. And thanks to all mobilization of vapers, our directive has been modified in the right direction. Or, if I may say, we all know that it doesn't correspond perfectly to the expectations of all the associations of users. Nevertheless, after the adoption of that text, it is, of course, to the state members to act and react and explain all the potential of vape in order to enhance a real debate and work for the reduction of problems linked to tobacco, whereas addiction is really one of the scourges in Europe, and we have a lot of death each year. So fortunately, the debate will continue inside the European Union, and the European Commission has to carry out a new study, and in fact, that will enable us to change the point of view linked to the e-cigarettes, linked to these 2 studies made in 2014, in order to really fight against that situation. The European initiative has also the idea to stress another aspect linked to another directive, which will deal with the expectations of the ex and ancient smokers. I hope that European Vape Association community will answer in a responsible way to all the expectations, and I wish to you all an excellent fair, an excellent 2014 edition. Many thanks. So before starting the presentation, Lorien, would you like to react to Frédérique RIES' presentation? Have you worked with her?
Frédérique wasn't, obviously in the UK we had our own MEPs who we tried to work very closely with. Frédérique, kind of indirectly we had communications with, because obviously the guys in France and at home in the UK we talked a lot because we had to coordinate a movement. At home, there was a lot of respect for Frédérique and her passion and how she stood by that all the way through, and she genuinely fought. We also had a MEP, a Liberal Democrat MEP, Rebecca Taylor, who in the end abstained from the final vote in the belief that she couldn't allow the TPT to go through with the benefits of the tobacco control elements, but the very negative things that were happening to e-cigarettes, and various members of the Conservative Party as well. So we had supporters, probably not on the level that you guys did with Frédérique. She was quite a force to be reckoned with throughout that entire process.
On va parler de la négociation qui a eu lieu à Bruxelles.
Okay, we'll deal with the negotiation in Brussels in that precise moment. The objective, nevertheless, this afternoon is first to deal with the future, to deal with the consequences of the adoption of that directive, the transposition also in France and in other countries. And Nicolas, you have a first general presentation on dealing with the European regulation. Many thanks. I will speak in English, so you will have the French translation.
Je ne peux pas. Est-ce que...
Oui, à droite ici.
There we go, very good. Bon. So, thank you very much. This question is a really, really broad question, and I think it's already being answered in parts. I think there are 4 or 5 things that we can expect over the next year, 2 years, 3 years. And as I said, some of those are happening now. Very, very quickly, there are already challenges to the TPD. These challenges have only been made in one European country, the UK, but I think it's significant enough to talk to you very briefly about that today. There's obviously transposition efforts. These are ongoing, and they've already started in many countries. And it's tea leaf reading at this stage, a bit of guesswork, but we obviously have the rough contours of what's happening. And then there'll be challenges to the transposition in the different countries. That will only take place once the directive has been transposed. And then I think related to the adoption of the TPD are standardization efforts. These are ongoing currently. They're ongoing in both the UK and France, for example. And related to that, I think there will be the development of good manufacturing practices for the Ecig market. So let me talk quickly about challenges to the TPD. These are and this is what I should have noted on this slide, these are pre-transposition challenges. As I said, these are all located in the UK. One has been brought by Philip Morris International. One has been brought, very interestingly for our purposes today, by Totally Wicked, which is a UK e-liquid and e-cigarette manufacturer. And we are expecting other challenges from within the industry over the next few months and before transposition efforts really get going.
Est-ce que vous avez le sentiment que les...
Do you have the feeling that all the efforts which have been carried out by, SMEs or other actors, like, different situations, is that possible to be enhanced, and mainly in the, European Court?
I hate being put on a spot like that, but I'm going to answer the question.
Si vous devriez donner un pourcentage.
If you could give us a percentage.
I don't think these challenges will work. Now, I think that the arguments advanced are strong ones, but I feel that all the European Court of Justice has to do is find some connection between the directive and advancing the movement, the internal movement of goods. And they will do that, I think, in this instance, because we now have concentration levels set. We have certain prescriptions for tank size, for example, that arguably will allow the free movement of these products throughout the Union. Now, I'll make the point at the end of my presentation that I'm sure will be advanced in this litigation, but that's not really the case. But I think there'll be enough for the European Court of Justice to do what it will often do, and that's to find the directive perfectly legal.
Je pense que ce qu'il est important de rappeler, on peut...
What is important maybe also to stress is to give the floor to Lorien for a few minutes. We have a lot of wondering here about that concrete aspect of the directive, like, nicotine delivery, as far as the contents of the notifications which will have to make the producers, the manufacturers, the e-liquids manufacturers in order to launch new products. All these points are under debate, but the content is uncertain. Lorien, which are the points on which you were really mobilized and really, according to you, what are the main points that have to be discussed about that directive?
I think from the point of view of, obviously I come at this from a consumer angle. I'm not with an industry of any description. I am a consumer. So a lot of what we look at is what's happening on the ground with consumers and with how the public treats consumers. Now what we've seen since the TPD is a lot of fear. The things like the 20 milligram limit, the size of tanks, the fact that nicotine needs regulating, all of these things have frightened the public. It's also allowed the very powerful groups like the British Medical Association, the Faculty of Public Health, various pharmaceutical groups in the UK to really play on the fact that nicotine needs to be controlled. It's a frightening substance. Merely a drop can kill. Now, I flew over here yesterday on Flybe, and I had all of my e-liquid confiscated at the airport, and I was not allowed to put it on the flight at all. The reason I was given is that a tiny amount will kill. Now this is what the TPD is allowed to happen. It's set in people's minds arbitrary levels of nicotine, and this is one of the major things we've got to deal with. In France, obviously, your limitation is 20 milligrams per milliliter anyway. At home, we don't have that as such. We can go up to 54 milligrams. Is not that difficult to come by. And the average nicotine use in the UK is about 18 milligrams. So for us, that has a major impact. They're the most major concerns, and what it's allowed, the fear it's allowed to instill in people has been really crippling and troubling for us.
Okay. Nicolas,
Okay, coming back to the regulation, and also to be clear for the public here, the audience, the European regulation is linked to tobacco products. It is a revision of European regulation, and with the e-cigarette, it creates a new category, products connected to tobacco. So it's not only tobacco, but also it's something new, a new category of products. Yeah, absolutely. Not only in Europe, but also you can see that in different countries.
You see that issue being addressed not only in Europe, you're going to see this addressed in a couple of weeks' time, most likely at the WHO conference in Moscow, where it appears, based on an agenda item published at the end of July, but the WHO may seek to recommend the regulation of e-cigs by trying to squeeze e-cigs into a definition that, frankly, doesn't work on any level. And there's also this attempt, of course, in the US to deem cigarettes a tobacco product. What's happened in Europe is a little bit different, and is a subcategory, and I think it's a much more intelligent way of approaching this.
Okay.
Okay, what about your presentation? Do you have other points to stress and to propose here?
Je vais parler, non, pas vraiment.
Not really. Actually, I have concluded.
Time's moving on, so we can move on also.
Arnaud Dumas de RAULY, on va écouter votre présentation. Alors il va falloir simplement que vous échangiez vos places. Et Arnaud Dumas de RAULY va nous parler de la transposition de la directive de manière concrète. Il va prendre le cas de l'Espagne, qui est un peu le cas qui fait peur, qui inspire beaucoup de craintes, parce que la directive européenne a été prise en compte par les autorités espagnoles de manière assez stricte. C'est vrai qu'il y a la place aujourd'hui pour réglementer la vape en tant que produit différent d'un produit du tabac, mais néanmoins, on a le sentiment qu'il y a toujours cette tentation de la part des pouvoirs publics d'assimiler la cigarette électronique à un produit du tabac.
Alors, bon, je vais rester sur ce slide parce qu'on va en parler très brièvement. Aujourd'hui, ce qui s'est passé en Espagne, c'est ce qui va se passer dans tous les États européens à l'avenir. L'Espagne est un État précurseur. Bon, la directive n'est pas entièrement transposée encore, mais elle est bien 50-60% transposée. Et on se rend compte dans cette transposition que finalement, c'est pas, si je peux m'exprimer ainsi, c'est pas dégueulasse comme transposition. On aurait pu s'attendre à pire. Aujourd'hui, ce qui s'est passé avec l'Espagne, c'est que l'Espagne a un petit peu... c'est pas un monopole des buralistes, mais c'est un peu le même schéma qu'en France, avec des réseaux de distribution bien définis. Ces réseaux de distribution ont fait pression un petit peu sur le gouvernement pour avoir une transposition un peu plus fermée. Le gouvernement a dit « Ok, on va transposer rapidement, mais on va la laisser ouverte ». Aujourd'hui, en Espagne, vous pouvez vendre en tant que professionnel de la cigarette électronique n'importe où. Vous avez juste à notifier à la base votre activité au gouvernement. Alors, je suis désolé, la présentation est en anglais. Je vais la commenter en français, si l'ordinateur veut bien me laisser le faire. Alors, vraiment, juste au début, le principe de l'Espagne, c'est qu'on avait vraiment un marché fragmenté. Tout le monde faisait un petit peu ce qu'il voulait. C'était un peu le Far West, comme on a pu entendre il y a quelques années en France. Et tout le monde se lançait là-dedans. Le gouvernement a pris peur, les institutions ont pris peur, et le public a pris peur. Les vapoteurs ont fait entendre leur voix, mais le mouvement, le grassroots qu'on peut avoir en France, qu'on peut avoir en UK, n'est pas du tout représentatif de ce qu'on peut trouver en Espagne. En Espagne, c'est vraiment, vraiment fragmenté. Et à cause de l'État et de la situation économique espagnole, on a eu beaucoup de choses qui étaient très, très limites en termes de cigarettes électroniques. Du coup, le gouvernement a vraiment voulu transposer rapidement cette loi.
Juste peut-être d'un mot pour préciser. La date limite de transposition est mai 2016. La critique qui a été formulée au gouvernement espagnol, et c'est pour ça qu'on en parle aussi comme un contre-exemple, c'est que le gouvernement espagnol a agi dans la précipitation. Le texte européen pour les cigarettes électroniques précise des éléments généraux, mais il y a beaucoup de ces points qui doivent être explicités. Et c'est vrai que la critique qui a été formulée de la part des militants engagés pour la Vape a été de dire « Attendez, vous avez jusqu'à mai 2016 pour transposer. Sur la notification, sur la délivrance constante de nicotine, sur la manière dont les producteurs vont pouvoir s'insérer dans ce cadre réglementaire, laissez-nous le temps, dialoguons ensemble pour que nous puissions avoir un texte qui réponde véritablement aux attentes des vapoteurs. » Et c'est vrai qu'au-delà du fond de la transposition espagnole, il y a aussi le timing qui est reproché. Et aujourd'hui, on a quand même un marché espagnol qui est en phase de régression.
And now we still have a market, which is not working and which is not flourishing.
Un petit peu.
Yes, absolutely. The market, as every market within Europe. So, an enormous growth, and this growth was just cut off. So everybody wanted to get rid of the products, and the market is going to be relaunched again. But of course, we're going to see a small period, maybe 6 to 8 months, where it's going to be slower than before. And today, what is happening in Spain is something which could happen in any country. For professionals, everybody in the room knows that we have to take action. Everybody needs to get his ass off the chair. And the Vapers needs to go to their association to fight together. If we don't fight together, then we are going to face a war, and the institutions will take decisions in our place. So we need to take action. Just to end on what is happening in Spain, something we haven't discussed yet is that there's a lot of media polemics. The media is trying to aggravate what is happening on the electronic cigarettes. The scientists, of course, are financed by the laboratories, and they said, okay, electronic cigarette is bad for your health. So they create some sort of a phenomenon in the minds of people which is bad. And it's also because of that the market plummeted, of course. Concerning the different elements within the directive. I have to say that the directive doesn't prohibit people to use the e-cigarettes in public spaces, but of course today we see that the electronic cigarette is a closed product, an open product, and we're going to discuss about this later on. But they want to close it off. They just want to close it and have a closed system. And okay, what certain players want is that we are limited to one product with one disposable cartridge, and that's all. So, and the Vape community offers other more sophisticated devices to the audience. So today what we want, and the associations want, FIVAPE for example, is to leave the consumers a possibility to have more sophisticated material, and those need to be need to be authorized, and the authorization needs to stay. So the fact that this was not discussed in the directive is a positive point, but in the UK, it was decided that in public spaces, e-cigarettes could still be used, and of course the different member states could have a say in the directive as well. So that was something which Lorien discussed before. At the airport, you said it before, everything was confiscated, and so that is something, well, we have a distinction here between Vape and tobacco.
Strictly speaking, yes, there is a distinction, and a lot of people accept there is a distinction. But there is, in the UK, we're quite fortunate because of the work that parts of the industry has been doing and ECCA has been doing, and the community are quite active and quite forceful, as they are in most EU countries. But we are genuinely facing a problem within the public health community itself. They are at war with one another. We have some of the most respected minds in the country calling each other tobacco apologists. Now, we are very fortunate to have people like Robert West on our side who produces some of the most astonishing data. But then on the other hand, people like me read the data and people like you read the data. What the press go for is not the data. They want the stories, and they want the dogs being poisoned by e-liquid bottles and the children and the exploding batteries. And that's kind of what we're faced with. We're faced with public health tearing each other to pieces publicly, and the public themselves kind of turning against vapers to a degree because we're now seen to be almost as frightening as smokers appear to be. And this does come off of all the things that are allowed to happen and all the media coverage that happened with the Tobacco Products Directive.
Nicolas, moi, il y a un autre point que je voulais aborder avec vous.
Another subject I'd like to introduce is the logic of harmonization on the European level. With the notification, all the manufacturers will have to inform their governments on the products that they put into the market. So in a second phase, every European country, the 28, will have to create an annual report for the European Commission to see what is happening on the market, the electronic cigarettes and the products as well. Don't you feel that there's going to be a study of the European Commission to put aside the other articles? Don't you think this will slow down the actual market? And maybe this will impede some manufacturers to continue their activities because their system will be managed from Brussels, from the European Commission.
This is an issue that inevitably you face as your industry becomes developed and becomes bigger and has more of an impact. Regulation is there, it doesn't matter what your industry is. At some point you have to face it, and I think it's a sign that this industry is maturing and needs to become professional on all levels. And I think that it's important that the governments have this information. I think it's information we need to have, and hopefully that would lead to better secondary reglementation. And by that I mean general manufacturing principles, standardization, those sort of efforts.
Ok.
I would like to propose in this second phase to go to the audience. If you have any questions, please let us know. We had some questions as well from the forum by internet, and the question was, when the European directive will be transposed, will all the models of the third generations, will they be prohibited or not? That's a very big question, $1 million question, of course. Today, it is, scientifically speaking, possible to explain that these models can stay onto the market. But the problem that we're going to face is, and I'm weighing my words, but we'll have to lobby for these models to explain how they work and to make sure that they do what they are conceived for. So the manufacturers in China, for example, and I was 10 days in China 2 weeks ago, and all the manufacturers want regulations. They want to know, they exactly want to know what European Union wants, what the United States want to do concerning the Ecigs. So they want information on the rules. And they're ready, they're willing to adapt their products to this. Once they will have the information on the transposition and the directives, they will follow with specific technicalities and technical specifications. So it will not be prohibited, but the battle has only started. On the internet, of course, you will be able to buy products which do not meet the necessary requirements from the European Union. We also see extensive models, other models. And what do you think about the application of the text, the way it has been conceived in Brussels? How is this going to work?
And legislation is another, and I think it's really quite unclear at the moment what the enforcement mechanisms will be in each jurisdiction. I'd like to just go back quickly to the point that Arnaud made about the open systems. I think that European countries will come down and may come down differently on this issue. And what I said earlier about these challenges and the European Court of Justice saying, well, there probably will be sufficient nexus because this allows the free movement of a product that's essentially standardized. Well, here you have an example of that product maybe not being standardized. But I've been a lawyer in both the US and in the UK. I've never seen a judge or a court allow practical reality get in the way of a judicial decision.
Est-ce qu'il y a des questions dans le public au sujet?
Are there any questions on the European directive? And we have a microphone which is circulating. Good afternoon. I don't understand how you can say that the models of the third generation would not be prohibited, because we know that there's a line within the European directive that certain models are going to be prohibited. And this could be spread out over the whole European Union. That's a very big debate, of course. This point was introduced in various directives, but has never been applied, if I'm not mistaken. Well, on this point, indeed, a lot of discussions took place, and the member states had to say to the European Commission that a product was dangerous and that it needed to be prohibited. And it's a case-by-case thing. So one liquid, one tool needs to be notified by at least 3 members to the European Commission in order to get an authorization. So I don't know how many products are available here, but probably thousands. And these need to be notified to the European Commissions. They will be submitted to a certain procedure. And if they are not accepted, they can be prohibited. So the European Commission wanted to So a product, for example, that was introduced in September and a couple of months later was not accepted, could be prohibited from the market within the European Union. Well, practically speaking, a member state will never say this is prohibited. Because politically speaking, they won't do it, simply. Are there any other questions?
I just have a question for Nick, if I may. Hello.
Yes, hello.
Very nice to see you today. Just wondering why you seem quite convinced that the legal challenges will be ignored, not ruled for. I mean, obviously the PMI one is not relevant to us because they're not challenging Article 20. But the Totally Wicked challenge is specifically to Article 20 on proportionality, as I understand it, and on anti-competitiveness. I'm very intrigued, especially because you're a lawyer, as to why you think it would not be a politically acceptable judicial decision to rule in favour of that challenge, when it seems quite obvious that actually in terms of free movement of goods, this is going to create an unregulated black market everywhere.
I had to come down one way.
Donc, il fallait trancher, oui ou non, bien sûr.
And I just think that if the European Court of Justice wants to rule in a certain way, it will find enough of a connection between the legislation and freedom of movement. And I think it does come back to that product description, you know, the product reglementation. And at the moment, you've got different things going on. We just heard about it in the UK and in France. And I think that they will find that way. I think there's been so much effort going into this TPD. There's been so much involvement in it. I don't think they're going to look for any reason to overturn it. And they will look for reasons to uphold it. And if they look for reasons to uphold it, they'll find them, they'll articulate them, and that will be the end of the judicial ruling. That's my thought.
This is maybe why the work that we're doing, along with the CETA in terms of product standards, is going to help in that case, and people are going to be able to use those standards to try and narrow the TPD down in the.
I think the work that's going on right now in the UK and in France is phenomenally important. I think it's no coincidence that they're going on in parallel. I think there's quite a bit of cross-pollination going on. I've been waiting for years to say that word in a in a conference setting. But I think that those two countries will produce something that will look and feel quite similar, and they'll set the standard for Europe, because these are two very substantial markets in Europe. And if you're producing anything in Europe and you want to get into that market, you'll have to meet those norms and standards. So I think this is enormously important, and will set the trend for the rest of Europe. They will either regulate by piggybacking, or they'll have to by default, because their own manufacturers will have to meet these standards.
Merci. Est-ce qu'il y a d'autres questions pour nos panélistes?
Are there any other questions for the people in the panel? Concerning the substances, are we going to be able to sell the 20 milliliter flasks? I thought that it was going to be limited to 10 milliliters. Yes, indeed. Well, cost-wise speaking, I'd say we cannot change a lot about this. So all the flasks of 20 milliliters will have to be sold out of stock, and then it will stop. Or, well, of course, we will have to wait for the transposition of the text. That takes about 6-8 months. And the only way to have to be able to change this is to change the directive. Maybe 2016, 2018, and there might be a change, because some scientists say that it's like filling up your car and filling it up every 30 kilometers with a small quantity of gasoline. So that's indeed something rational. So of course, if you spill, for example, the liquid, you don't have a lot of nicotine on your hand, for example. With the 30 milliliters, for example, that's the same thing for the rechargeables. Also, the lower the quantities, the lower the risks, of course. So it's interlinked, it's intertwined. And the reason, just to give you some context, is simply that at the European Commission, they thought that the flasks of 10 milliliters that if a child, for example, would if a child would be taking this flask, it would be less dangerous for a child if he or she swallowed it. So, well, for a child, it would be a small difference because 20 or 30, it's as toxic, I think.
It's worth bearing in mind that a lot of these ideas that they've had and are going to implement in 2016 are based on the LD50 being wrong, as Jacques points out. We know, and the work that Ecig is doing, that the level of toxicity beneath 25 milligrams per milliliter simply isn't anything to be concerned about. But when they came up with these rules, they weren't aware of that, or they chose to ignore it. They also misappropriated Vassilinos' work and Lynn Dawkins' work. By the time we come around to 2016, and again when the review comes around at 2018, hopefully there will be movement for this, because the 10 milliliter bottles was based on the idea of having less fluid to spill on yourself, because obviously when it touches your skin it burns a hole and you die, apparently. Now that is not going to be the case, and by then they're going to know that. So hopefully the 20 milliliter bottles, 30 milliliter bottles will come back, because they don't make any sense, and there's more waste with it as well.
Lorien, il y a un autre sujet dont il faut qu'on parle.
We have to speak of another subject as well. We have to talk about the FVI, which is the European Citizen Initiative, which was created before the directive. And there's a number of vapers who wanted to go against the work of the European Commission, also within the Treaty of Lisbon, for example, and they wanted to collect about 1 million signatures and to propose to the Commission, okay, we want to see the directive to be changed. And this, of course, in the framework of all the debates that are going on. So this initiative, we know it very well in France and the United Kingdom as well, and it will probably be difficult to reach those 1 million signatures, but would it be possible to convince the vapers to sign this and to say, okay, please adhere to this?
The concept of EFVI is a fantastic one. The kind of citizens' initiative, however, was set up to be borderline impossible. The few people that have gotten through the system are big NGOs and people like Greenpeace and the World Wildlife Fund, who have a huge resources to reach their audience. Now, we're at a disadvantage here because we don't have a huge resource. The only resource we have are vendors. Okay, you have more contact with your customers than us as consumers and advocates can possibly dream of having. Now, an amazing amount of work has been done on EFVI already, and a lot of normal, everyday, unpaid people are working their asses off to get this into gear. It is a lot to ask. The numbers that have to be achieved are astonishing, and it is not meant for us to be able to achieve. We do need more input from the vendors, from all of the European countries that need to get a specified amount of signatures to actually, be pushing this more in their stores. We can't reach these people. You can. Okay, this is something that you really can help with. We just need signatures.
Je vois le FVI.
I'm looking at the FVI France, and they will take the floor probably in a few minutes. Are there any other questions concerning the FVI and concerning the directive or nicotine, maybe? No questions? Are there any substances that will be prohibited, like diacetyl, for example? Well, the European Union and the member countries need to draw up a list. A list will be drawn up by the member states and in collaboration with the Commission. Because, of course, there will also need to be a political link. These things will have to be put into legislation, will have to be transposed. So there will have to be a definition as well of the substances contained in the e-liquids. And there was a question for Lorien as well on the internet forum, and I will ask this question now. Do you think there will be any flasks or any colors of e-liquids that will be prohibited in the future?
Do I? I think there is, of course, there is potential for it. Colors, I mean, they add something to the experience and to the look. However, whether or not you can say they are necessary for the experience, I'm not entirely sure. And it isn't unreasonable to suggest that if something that has as much of a potential as vaping has to take over smoking, you're talking about a lot of people potentially doing this in 10, 20 years, then it does have to be as safe as it can be. It can't be completely safe. That's not reasonable. In terms of flavour groups, again, there are potential. We know that with diacetyl and with the various compounds used to produce, creamy, buttery flavours, which are very popular in the UK and in the States. These things have to have replacements. But by the same token, we also need to know the absolute dangers of these things. Diacetyl is still a relative unknown, and the original work on diacetyl was very rushed and very hurried. We actually need more research being done into these things, rather than money being looked at whether or not children are using them. We want studies done, and we want to know what they're producing, what impact these actually have, and most importantly, how relevant it is in terms of risk to that of smoking. That is the bottom line on this. This is a replacement for smoking. It's not a replacement for having an apple every day. This is a recreational thing that we're doing.
Nicolas, c'est vrai que la question...
The question actually of colorants and all these flavors has been dealt with in the States, and the parallel between what has been done in Europe and TPD mainly, and the United States FDA, the procedure which was concluded in August in order to regulate products from vape, and via that Tobacco Act. So, compared to the States and the European Union, what do you think of the two theories? Have we got the same criteria?
There's a middle way between the two. I think that the two regulatory regimes are so different. I think that I happen to believe that some of the challenges in the US may have a greater chance of prevailing. I think that we don't really know yet what the deeming regulation will be. At the moment, it's just a proposal. And I think if it gets published as proposed, I think there will be challenges. I think there'll be very strong challenges, and I think the deeming regulation will be overturned, at least in part. I suspect what will happen, however, just to kind of clarify what I think will happen there, I think that the FDA will come back with a new proposed rule that will try to treat e-cigarettes differently. Whether that will withhold challenge is another question.
Merci beaucoup. Merci à vous trois.
Many thanks to you all. Many thanks for answering our questions on those topics. And we'll put that also on the YouTube link on the internet. And you'll have the opportunity to review our meeting. So at 4, we'll deal with the standardization. And we'll welcome representatives of AFNO in France and also the European Committee for Standardization. Many thanks to you all. See you after. Bye-bye.